as well. Excellent. And just like I heard, it's good to be back. Yes, we are here, not for weekly webinars anymore, but bi-monthly, because it makes it a little bit easier for us, as long as we make sure that we've got that routine. So we'll do that as much as we possibly can. We're here to talk about humanizing transformation. We are here to talk about how we do that using modern mindset theory. Now, we kind of, sometimes I'm giving you a bit of the framework, aren't I? But sometimes I just prod and poke, and that's what I'm doing today. So it's really interesting. Today's conversation, and I hope that this is a conversation, it was generated by a training program I did recently. And I did a training program recently with a group of leaders. And we got onto the subject of coherence. And it was really interesting because unanimously in the room, the leaders said, this is a really strange word. It's a really strange word for us to use in our leadership narrative, let alone in the narrative of strategic planning and transformation, etc., etc. And when you first see it, you kind of go, oh, I don't know, is it kind of like, are we going to start talking about love in the boardroom? But actually, the conversation opened up and it became really, really, really powerful. And from that conversation, I went away and thought to myself, this is so in line with humanizing transformation. It's so in line with the concept of modern mindset theory that it would be really, really good to actually have a session on coherence. And given a few sessions ago, maybe 2 sessions ago, we talked about flow, and flow in and of itself is so aligned with coherence. So there's a few slides I've got today that are borrowed over from that session. So given what I've just said there, I'm setting the scene, right? I'm setting the scene for today, right? It means that I don't have any answers, which is kind of scary, but just totally beautiful at the same time. And I wonder where today's going to go, because I don't know. But I want to talk about coherence because I'm really into it at the moment. And let's just see what it brings up for everybody else. As always, I am here to share a quote with you all. And interestingly enough, here we go, right? Tom Peters. If you don't know who Tom Peters is, and I'm sure that everybody on the call today knows Tom Peters, has come across him. He's one of these traditional American leadership gurus. And he's talking about coherence. This quote, without exception, the dominance and coherence of culture proved to be an essential quality of the excellence of companies. And that is a line, that is a quote based on his work and his research. So even back in the 70s, we've actually got people using this word in their narrative around successful transformation and leadership. So it shouldn't be strange for us to have this word in our leadership narrative or our transformation narrative. But it's still, I don't know for you, it's still a little bit, what do we mean by it? And, are we bordering on that fuzzy, could you have a conversation with your leaders around coherence? How do you think they might receive it? It's interesting, isn't it? So there we go. I haven't even started my slides, and it's just the quote. And already I'm giving you a little bit of a prod in terms of thinking about what does this word mean, and how might you introduce this word in your narrative? I went on a wee bit of a journey, as I said to you, when the whole kind of concept of coherence started widening up for me beyond just flow. And the first thing that I asked myself was this: where am I? Where are my customers? Where are the leaders that I work with? Where are they most challenged in delivering and supporting successful transformation? Where are the challenges? And if any one of us was to go to the House of G, aka Google, or wherever we go for our wonderful knowledge in the Alexandra library of the internet, what would come back to us? And it's an open question, actually. So I don't know whether you want to come off mute and just share with me, where are we most challenged in delivering and supporting successful transformation? what was interesting for me was the conversation I had with the leaders. I asked them that question, and they said the biggest challenge that they had was in the transference, the alignment between their strategy and culture stroke execution. That was the biggest challenge for them. That was their biggest challenge. I've got Jane, I can see you thinking there. Where are your customers, or where are you most challenged in delivering and supporting successful transformation?
The reason why I pulled my face and I looked, I was like, that gets me thinking, because it's interesting that leaders say it, because any tech transformation that I've worked on is that we always align outcomes to strategy. There is always what is aligned with strategy here, and we define that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that leaders say that in relation to transformation. But for me, what I've always found is that you can bring in transformation, you can do all these things. It's really that the adoption and the change and I guess that's the cultural piece.
Exactly.
It's the culture of people and actually lots of individuals in that. And I don't know if perhaps those leaders were then talking about that translation of strategy and around culture and people and bringing them on that journey.
Yeah, there's a quote that I heard recently, Jane, which is, and I found it quite fascinating, is that it would be, and the quote is around, it would be a really good exercise for people, leaders and people in the world of change and transformation, to think more around the difference between communication and engagement. Because and this is coming from a change manager, and what she was saying was that more often than not, she finds people merge those two words together, and they should be seen and designed and executed and monitored and measured as two completely separate things, communication and engagement, and yet they get the water gets muddied. So really, really interesting. And there's something that you kind of alluded to at the start as well of your thinking, which speaks to part of where my journey went to with this whole coherence thing. So, which is very, very interesting. But clearly for you, it's people, isn't it? It's the most challenging thing. It's people. Claire, what about you? I saw you come off and then you went back on to.
Yeah, and it's probably something I need to think about to articulate properly, but I'll give it a go. So and possibly because what we're talking about on this webinar, but I think we think of transformation, and again, depending on what area you're in, including like local government, and it's all about checklists and transactional and paperwork, and you have to achieve X, Y, and Z. And that's all fine. But when the focus goes to that's all very kind of at the surface. And then the human side, the emotion, is sometimes put to the side, because, how could you possibly be human or have emotions and understand the connection between your head and your heart when you work in public sector? That you just wouldn't do that. But actually, it's seeing transformation as the transformation it's not about, as you referenced, Mel, like lots of times, it's not about it being a project, it's about the humans. So, it's transforming, realizing that we need to think about transformation in terms of, again, back to people, but that also requires that thinking to happen, from the leadership level, from, in our case, the likes of elected members, from staff. And I think you asked about, how do we think people might react to the previous slide? I think that it would be, oh, that's a bit icky, you know, I don't want to do that. No, we don't do that. But actually, I'm not sure that necessarily would be people's response if they were guided on the journey. And that's actually where people get really interested. You know, that's actually where people are like, oh yes, this is really interesting. It's not about, you know, how you write something on paper. It's actually how it feels to people. So that was my attempt to try and articulate, people, culture, and just.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, you know, it's thread, isn't it? Coherence is about a thread. And you were talking about, you know, as long as you bring people on the journey, there's thread there, which is really, really interesting. That's I love it. Fantastic. Tom, I saw you, by the way. Hello.
Hello. Yes. So you asked how are we supporting our clients? As one of my clients is on the call, just describe this, and hopefully we'll hit on the same thing. So also thinking about coherence, one of the things I see is that the leaders in the organization I'm working with can see that there's a cultural challenge, but don't know how to be part of changing that culture individually. And they can all see that maybe the culture is affecting their behavior and the way they respond, but they don't know how to respond in a different way. And I think bringing that coherence, if this is where the talk is going, bringing that coherence and an acceptance that, you know, these are the issues that we've got within the culture, and this is how we'd like to change it. And therefore, these are and if we all make that change together, then actually we might be able to shift the ball a bit.
That's, I absolutely agree. So do you know there's two words that have come up in everything that we've just shared in those responses? First word is separation, and the second word is reality. And those two words came up for me in my journey of discovery around this concept of coherence in the world of modern leadership and transformation. Very, very, very interesting. So the first question we've got to ask ourselves, right, is what does coherence actually mean? And the interesting thing is there is coherence theory. So there is a huge amount of academia around this concept. However, it is in and of itself a little bit woolly. So it's open to interpretation. And I think, you know, and I say this so often when I'm working with customers on things like strategy and vision and moonshots, I always say, it doesn't matter whether you've got a moonshot or a vision per se, as long as it's right and as long as you are all coherent around it, as long as, you know, you all understand what it means. So I think when we're introducing coherence, the first thing that we need to do with our customers, with our transformation, is ensure that we have got our own definition of what it means. Because if we go out to talk to people about coherence without the subtitle of, and this is what we mean by it, introducing new language will be open to interpretation, and people will just basically make their own reality out of it. So the first thing to do around, you know, if we want to introduce coherence, which I think we all should, by the way, because the power of it is just phenomenal, is make sure that we are bringing definition behind it. So academically, it says that the theory is the ultimate criterion of truth, i.e. the ultimate criterion of truth is coherence of all separate parts with one another and experience. Translate that into English for us, Mel. Basically, every component is connected to every component is connected, and there is experience. There is experience. It's not just that your stuff is connected, it's that the experience is also connected and coherent. And Claire, that speaks to what you were saying. It's not just the stuff of transformation, it's the hearts and the minds of the people. It's the humans as well. And the humans are the people that experience transformation. But then we have the stuff of it, the technology of it, the strategy of it, the narrative of it, the language of it, the nuts and bolts of it. So there's something really interesting there right at the start. So that kind of talks to a little bit of separation. But there's also something else as well, which I found amazing in my research, which was this. Coherence is also about understanding everybody's reality. So aligning everybody's reality, because everybody's reality is different. So what we need to be doing is we need to be thinking as leaders and as leaders of transformation, how are we able to understand a little bit more about the lens through which our humans are seeing this and seeing their world right now. So it's aligning our humans' reality, which speaks to engagement more than comms. Very, very, very interesting. The biggest thing about coherence as an output that I've learned in my journey is truth. It's truth. And I think that is super, super important. So there are some real important elements for us to think about. And there is also something else to think about in terms of how we might see coherence and where we might want coherence. And right at the top of this slide is something else that I discovered in my journey around coherence. And this is why I said at the very start, today is about exploration. Today is not about answers. Today is just about, thought and thinking. What is interesting is that there are different planes, I think is the best way to describe it, of how we might want to think about coherence. So we might want to think about where we are coherent in terms of things and humans, stuff and humans, what we do and who we are, heart and mind within the human. But there is also coherence between the past, the present, and the future as well. And if you go to the work of Owen Eastwood, and Owen Eastwood wrote a book called Belonging, and he does a huge amount of work in this area of aligning, especially in transformation, our past with our present and our future. And in the coherence theory, there are some academics that talk to the need for us to have coherence between where we've been, where we are now, and where we are going. And the interesting thing here is a lot of people are stuck in different places. A lot of people are stuck in the past. A lot of people are stuck in the now. And actually some people are stuck in the future, what I will be doing, what I want to be doing, and not necessarily getting stuff done even now. So again, no right answers, but just expanding our thinking around this concept of coherence. We've already talked about stuff, things, and humans. We've also uncovered that concept of, Claire, in your response, that heart and mind, which is what you said. But also there's this thing about, there's this timeline of coherence as well, our past, our present, and our future. And it's lovely, the work that Owen Eastwood does, because what he talks about is he talks about this, when he brings a team together. And I was interesting that your response on email this morning, Jane, by the way, I just saw it really quickly. Owen Eastwood talks about this. He says, when you bring a team together on transformation, be that the leadership team on strategy or the delivery team, or you're bringing a team of practice together, what you want to do is you want to spend some time with them to acknowledge and celebrate the past. So to acknowledge and celebrate what has gone on before us. What has happened before? What has gone on in the past? Let us acknowledge that and celebrate it. And then what you do is you let go of it once you've acknowledged it. Then you come into the present, and with that team, with that leadership team, with that group of practitioners, then what we say is, who are we now? Who are we? What is our identity? Because we are at the center of change always, whether we're a leader or whether we're a practitioner, we're at the heart of change. So what's our identity? What do we want our identity to be? And then the future becomes, what do we want our legacy to be? So when we pass over to another individual, to another, another team, or indeed to the humans as part of a people movement of transformation, what are we handing over? What do we want our legacy to be? And he talks about that using the word coherence. It's interesting, huh? What does everybody think about that? Tom, I'm going to come straight to you.
Yeah, I think that is something that I probably have missed a number of times in the past, because I'm always so interested in what's coming next and what's, what are we pursuing, what are we going towards. And actually, some of the comments that I got during a session in the last month or so, I think were a response to the fact that I'd not acknowledged the successes and the good work and the achievements to get to where we already are. And I think I really like that as an idea of coherence being a way of tying all of those things together, so that people can see the current state as part of a linear progression between where they've come from and where they're going to.
And Owen Eastwood speaks about that. He says, once you get your brain into this concept of past, present, and future, what you recognize is that you're on a continuum. So you're constantly moving, which is perfect, isn't it? That's what we want, change and transformation. The only thing that I would say to +1 you on that is, again, making sure that we've got once we're on that horizontal coherent plane, past, present, and future, to ensure that we don't lose sight of that vertical, which is the hearts and the minds, the stuff that we're doing as well as who we are. So, we've got to acknowledge our successes and, of what we've done, but we also have to acknowledge who we have been and who went before us. So making sure that we've got the human bit in it. Does that make sense? Because he talks about that quite a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Quite funny, because when you were talking now, there were things that I'd written, and then you started talking about it. So I wrote down alignment, a maturity of teams to be able to align. Because it's not about, because everyone's got different perspectives, and it's about creating environments to air those perspectives.
Yeah.
Around psychological safety, around people being able to feel that they can be open, but then also to be able to say, well, no, I don't fully agree with this because I wanted my option. But to have that maturity to be able to accept and align on it and say, okay, this is how we are going to move forward, and acknowledge it. And there is a level of maturity that's needed within a team, and it's taking people on that journey as well, and educating on that it's okay to be in disagreement.
Yeah.
Having those differing opinions. It's not. No one wants groupthink. No one wants to be everyone around the table saying all of those things. And it's creating that environment. And I guess the other thing that I'd add with the work that I was doing with helping an organization create set up a community, an agile community of practice, is we did those aspects of going, well, what have we done so far? What's here? So celebrating that. And a bit about who are we? We got people to write their own personal purpose statement, and then as a group collectively went through a process of creating a purpose statement as a group, with legacy, with our vision, and we got them to dream. We did visioning and dreamed into the future, and it was incredible about when we did the feedback around, okay, how do structured thinkers feel about this exercise? How was it for you? And they loved it. And it was a stretch. The stakeholders were like, I'm not sure about this. And I'm like, we're here to give it a go. We're here to give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And, that there is a reality about mindset shift. There is a reality about who we are becoming, transforming not just the stuff of organizations, but who we are as human beings. The reality is that there has to be discomfort, right? Because there has to be discomfort. And the easiest way is to just get a little bit of discomfort, but then keep going and then keep going and then keep going. So tiny, tiny bits of discomfort is super important. And the fact that you've started it, that is brilliant. And the most important thing really is awareness, isn't it? If individually there is space and time dedicated to me as a leader, as an individual, as part of change or transformation, having the time and being guided through becoming more deeply aware of who I am, and therefore, as a result, who I might be becoming as part of this transformation, as part of this new team, community of practice that you were setting up, that is the key. That is a key. That's strong foundation, because that's what we call the 5 Ps, as you would know, Tom. You know, it's profile, it's purpose, it's presence, it's preparedness, it's positive intelligence. Those are the 5 Ps. They are the foundational elements of any change and transformation from a human perspective. So, you know, you're speaking to so many of them there. And you're absolutely right. I think I might have mentioned this in a recent webinar, and apologies if I have, but if I haven't, great, because it's new to you guys. But doing the future self exercise, one of the greatest ways of doing that with a group of leaders is giving them colouring in pencils and a piece of paper, and to get them to look at you as if to say, what are you on about? Because what you do is you ask them to draw a picture of their future self, not use words, but draw a picture of your future self. And that is really interesting. And, you know, very, very similar to your experience there, Jane. When I do that, oh my God, could you cut the atmosphere with a knife in terms of discomfort? But at the end, the most unlikely of people come and say, that was arguably one of the most powerful things I have done. I've never done anything like that before. It made me think differently. So it's just, you know, we want to design discomfort, but do it in a way that is, you know, safe psychologically as well, isn't it? Which is so incredibly important. Comfortableness, absolutely. And I also think, you know, one of the things that you alluded to there as well is people being able to feel safe enough to speak their truth in terms of, you know, agreement, disagreement. It's just speaking truth from my perspective. You know, Radical Candor, I think that is one of the best books ever. I don't know whether you guys have read it, but it's a brilliant book, Radical Candor. It just gives so many insights on how we can support human beings in having courageous conversations. There is also the concept of covering as well. And that's something that we use in some of our leadership work. I don't know whether you have heard of the concept of covering, but a lot of people in the EDI arena talk to the work of, it's a gentleman called Yoshimo. So it's a Japanese gentleman who created the concept of covering. And essentially it's where we unconsciously see the truth of a situation and we start to cover it up. We start to literally cover it up. Have you ever been in a situation where I'm looking up, Tom's looked out the window, so I unconsciously see Tom being bored, so I want to cover it up.
It's my second monitor, Mel. It's my second monitor.
I can't believe it.
It's not a window. I promise. I'm looking things up.
I love it. And actually, I'll send everybody some links to his work, because the concept of covering is very interesting for leaders and for us as leaders of change and transformation, because I think we do inadvertently cover. It's very interesting, and it's not necessarily the best thing for us to do. So yeah, so something for us to think about there. And these are all little elements of, you know, supporting us with this concept of coherence. But again, you know, what are some more elements of coherence to think about? And I think here what we're saying is everything is connected, and all things, we strive for all things to be in balance and or harmony. If we are always just asking ourselves those two questions, do we understand and can we see if things are connected? Do we understand and can we see that those things connected are in harmony and or balance? those two questions, if we're constantly asking those two questions, that is so powerful in, you know, humanizing transformation and delivering success. And I also think this is really important. What are we building? Are we building a house or are we building a home? Are we building a house or are we building a home? Because if you're building a home, I love the concept, the visualization in your head here, a family in a home versus a family in a house. And that really, to me, is a powerful visualization of coherence. When we're in a home, a set of human beings in a home, there is coherence. And what do you see there? What do you see in that place that makes it home versus people that are in a house? And there was a gentleman that I worked with, actually a gentleman at Aberdeen City Council, and brilliant philosopher. And he did a piece of work on significance. And it's really interesting. And what he basically said was, you know, you can have a hammer and you can have some nails. And they are just stuff until you bring them together. And once you bring hammer and nail together, you give those two disconnected things significance, coherence, because you're giving the two meaning. On their own, they mean nothing. Together, they mean something. You're giving them significance. So how are we able to, when we're thinking about our teams and we're thinking about our humans, how are we able to help them to understand when they come together, what is the significance that we create when they come together, rather than just who they are or what they do? When we come together, there is significance. So there's a lot in here as well. What are you building? Are you building a house or are you building a home? And bringing significance into, you know, our hammers and our nails, bringing them together and making them significant, giving them meaning. Super, just really, really, really deep things that I think are really important for us to think about. So all of this stuff, I think, can maybe be brought into this these three things that I've got here on the screen. So at its top level, coherence between strategy, i.e. the thinking, and what we do and our culture. So at its highest level, are we coherent or have we got dissonance between strategy and action and culture? The second thing is, where are we vis-a-vis dissonance and coherence between heart and mind of the individual, well-being and performance of the humans? And then thirdly, dissonance versus coherence between who we are and what we do, the past, the future, and the present. Now, again, are we bringing coherence? Are we bringing, is there significance? Is there meaning with those three things? And from those three things, I would argue, I'm not saying it's easy, but I would argue that we could then start to think about metrics, because that's the key, right? We can understand coherence. We might even be able to talk about it and design for it. But by its very nature, coherence is something that is on a continuum. So we want to be monitoring it and measuring it. So the question then becomes, how can we? And I think these three things here might help us to understand how we might start to bring metrics into play for transformation, a humanizing transformation based on these three things. So when we're not coherent, we're dissonant. Where there is dissonance, and there's literally we are vibrating at different frequencies, very literally vibrating at different frequencies. And that is the key. If we're vibrating at different frequencies, there is dissonance. And if I see blue where you see red, we are at different frequencies, because that's the color spectrum. Where I am anxious and you are confident, there is dissonance, because that is emotional difference of frequency. So wherever we see this concept of coherence and the absence of coherence being dissonance, we should be thinking about frequency. Which is why I think it's important for us to also think about flow. But equally, what I've done here, because I know that I wanted to introduce a new concept today, and we're already, just a few minutes to the end of today's session. What I wanted to share with everybody is just a few markers for you to take away some thinking from today and just explore it. So that first thing that I mentioned here, strategy, action, and culture. So the big thing, and Jane, you mentioned it in your thought back at the beginning, which was, actually it is about culture. It is about strategy and culture. Patrick Lencioni, this particular video is a fantastic video to share with leaders and to share with people in the world of change and transformation about how and why it's so important to bring strategy and culture in together. And what he does is quite interesting, is he aligns the 5 dysfunctions of a high-performing team with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He brings the two together. He overlays 2 traditional leadership models, strategic models together, and how they work with each other. So that is really, really cool video for you to watch that helps you to think about how you might bring together strategy and action and culture. But there is also this concept of heart and mind and well-being and performance. And if you remember from a few sessions ago, we did talk about flow, and we also talked about how flow and coherence are so incredibly aligned. So what I've done here is I've just shared a few things in copying some slides over for you here. Again, there's a video here, and it's only about 4 minutes. The Patrick Lencioni video is only 4 minutes. We can do this. 10 minutes in your day is attributed to around about 1% of your time. 10 minutes in a day is around about circa 1% of your time. So we've all, 1% power up is a good thing for us to be practicing every day in terms of, getting into this stuff. There's a brilliant video here that talks about flow and coherence. Why I'm talking about it here in terms of heart and mind and well-being and performance is because of this. If our heart frequency is in line with our brain waves, our brain frequency, we are able to think more clearly. We are able to be more responsive. We are able to be more resilient. And what comes as a result of those things, we are open to more curiosity. We are open to more ideas. We are able to engage in more innovation. So if we've got dissonance with a leadership team between, in heart and mind, and some of the pointers are, I'm not too sure about that, or we might be able to see it in their body language, it's not that they don't want the change. It's not that they disagree with it. It's probably that there's heart-mind dissonance for them as a human being. How might we be able to bring their heart and their mind in alignment? That's one-to-one work. That's conversation. That's helping them to be aware. Is it exactly what you did with your team at the start of your project, Jane? You allowed people space and time to become self-aware. And when you become self-aware, it's only a matter of time before you are able to recognize, I'm being anxious, I'm worried, I'm confused. All of that stuff is dissonance between your head and your heart. So all of this stuff now is scientifically proven for us to bring into change and transformation. So if you haven't already gone into the world of the Heart Math Institute and the concept of heart rate variability, even in the most technical of designs, Tom, so just a little bit of a nod towards you there, it's super powerful stuff. Because to bring people on the journey of change, we need to be designing and supporting creating space and time for coherence between heart and mind. And at a group level, that will be well-being and performance. And the way to do that is through heart rate variability. It is absolutely amazing. And Jane, you're just talking about the alpha state there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of scientific research now that backs up, you know, if you set, literally, how many times have we said this in conversation? Set the tone. You want to set the tone for the conversation. I want to set the tone for this meeting. What you're talking about inadvertently is you're talking about heart rate variability. You're setting the tone. You want people to be, you know, it's like a tuning fork. You want us all to be resonating at the same rate. And you want people, heart and mind, to be coherent. And you can use very simple things like alpha binaural rates, beats, and so on and so forth. So, you know, a lot of people, I remember when I went to a leadership training program, and it was a training program that came over from Harvard. And I was on this training program, and the tutors, every time we started a conversation, would play a little bit of music. Every time we ended a conversation, they'd play a little bit of music. Then we'd have a break, they'd play a little bit of music. And at the end of each day of the training program, there would be about 4 or 5 minutes of music with, you know, things on the slides that we, and at the beginning I thought, what is going on here? But what they were doing, now I know, because one of the tutors is a dear friend of mine and I understand what they were doing. They were designing coherence in terms of heart rate variability, so that the conversation in the room was greater resilience, greater responsiveness, higher rates of curiosity, more propensity to innovate and engage in change and ideation. Oh my gosh, they were using this stuff scientifically in the design of the leadership development training. So we can do similar things.
It's quite funny, Mel, you mentioned this, because I attended a session with some of my design thinking cohort, and someone ran a session and they played like quite hard rock music when it came to a certain point. And I was like, just to feedback, like that was jarring for me. I had to turn the music off. And I was like, music is so important. Like whatever you're doing, like how to make it, getting people on those different wavelengths, but they didn't want to hear it. They just didn't want it. They were just like, oh, it's fine. It's just the music to move people. And I'm like, but for me, it was really like jarring. And it's like, it's like that's such an important point to get people into that same vibration.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's 2 things that we all know are true. The first thing we all know is that if you were to put a load of clocks in a room, all those clocks, in terms of the old-fashioned clocks with the, you know, the pendulums, all of the clocks will, and they're all going at different times, they're ticking at different times, they will all eventually tick to the same momentum of the strongest clock. And it doesn't matter how many times you change them, they will over time all start back in alignment with the strongest clock. The other thing we all know is true is that if you ding a tuning fork, all of the tuning forks will resonate to the same tuning fork, to the same frequency over time, always. So we already know this stuff is so incredibly important to us. It's important. This stuff is really important. And I'm experimenting more and more with the concept of setting the tone for my conversations, for the training that I'm about to do, for the session that I'm about to have. So setting the tone becomes part of design. Really interesting what you said there, Jane. So you've just basically described dissonance as opposed to a potential opportunity for creating coherence to get more out of people. Very, very interesting stuff. As I said, no answers today, just provocation. I have also added Alan Watkins' video here, which I did a few weeks ago. It is fantastic. I think he's got about 4 or 5 TED Talks that he's done over the years. You know, he's probably our UK version of the Heart Math Institute, and he does a huge amount of work with leaders. So he does he and his team do, and his organization is called Complete. So you can go onto his website and look at some of his work. But it's very, very interesting just to see, because what he does is he gives you the business case to take some of this concept of coherence into conversation with your leadership team, or into conversation with people that are involved in your change and transformation. And again, you know, what does it do? It gives us increased responsiveness, resilience, innovation, curiosity, etc., etc., etc. Just bringing everybody to just at this point of the day where I just share our training. So just to let everybody know, our spring summer sessions are out. We've got our schedule out, which is brilliant. We have redesigned our professional certification ever so slightly. So what we've done is we've split now into 3 levels. So we've got a foundation level now for those practitioners that just want to understand what modern mindset theory is, what humanizing transformation is all about. And then we go up to the standard, the most popular practitioner, which is the, you know, the practitioner level of you have practice as well as theory, and the 3rd level, which is our mentor certification. So becoming a qualified and licensed mentor to use humanizing transformation in mentoring and coaching. And of course, we've got transformation for non-transformational leaders, which is our kind of gung-ho program for leaders at the moment. And I have no idea why, but I think it's all to do with the fact that it sounds similar to finance for non-financial managers, and it just kind of, here we go, resonates. I'm using that word. It resonates with so many leaders because they're sitting there, you know, I've got so much experience that has got me to where I am. And all of a sudden, this thing called transformation comes around, and overnight I'm supposed to know it. And it's not fair. You know, leaders shouldn't just wake up in the morning and know all of that stuff. And that's our transformation for non-transformational leaders program. So if you'd like to know anything about those, then please do let me know, DM me on email. And always, I will always say this to everybody, Thursday afternoons, I try to keep free so that I give back to practitioners out in the wilds of transformation and modern mindset to work on themselves. So if you want to spend a little bit of time just on you, then Thursday afternoons are the time that I try and help fellow practitioners in the field just to understand a little bit about who they are and maybe bring a little bit of coherence to it. So the last thing, just before we close off today, a few more slides, but just bringing into the 3rd bit is who we are and what we do, right? The past, the future, and the present. Who we are and what we do. Are we all moving in the same direction? Does the organization see me in the future? Can I see myself in the future? How connected is the future with what we are doing right now? They are just 4 very simple questions for us to ask ourselves and to ask others around who we are, what we do, past, present, and future. There are some other things that I think are important for us to think about as well. Number 1, when it comes to coherence, we really need to be thinking about monitoring and measuring. But there is no right answer. There is absolutely no one right answer for this. What we have to do is we have to ask ourselves first and foremost, where do we need coherence? And remember what I said earlier on, we have coherence on a horizontal plane, past, present, and future. And then we have coherence on a vertical plane, which is so many different things. It's narrative, it's what we do versus who we are, it's strategy versus culture, it's performance, versus well-being, all of that kind of stuff. So where do we need coherence, and where might we have dissonance right now? Where do we sense dissonance right now? And then what we can do is we can start thinking about how we might potentially monitor this stuff. And Tom, this is a big one for you. How might we monitor this stuff in order for us to track performance over time and movement over time? Are people's actions coherent with the strategic intention? And that's a big one. You know, this is where the strategy is going. Why aren't people doing it? I mean, how many times do you hear that in the conversation? That's just a sign of dissonance. So we need to have a coherent conversation. So if we have a conversation about how can we make things coherent, then you know, it might change things for us. How are people feeling about change over time? That's another thing that is really important. And we can use things like Trickle and Friday Pulse and Donut and all of that kind of malarkey. They're really, really good for us to just have these tiny little pulse measurements over time, so that we've got people's sense of how they are feeling over time. How are people's realities aligned? And that's a big one. That's a toughie. And that's the one that I'm taking away and I'm really going to look deeply into. How do we start to understand, A, where people's realities are, and how we are shifting people's realities over time? How aligned are people's realities? That is a massive one, absolutely massive. And that's something that I think is a requirement for us as change practitioners to delve into a little bit more about how we might bring that into strategy, how we might bring that into design and execution, how we might be measuring and monitoring different people's realities, what they are and how aligned are they, and how aligned are those realities, or how coherent are those realities with the strategy. That is massive for humanizing transformation. And then there's just some tiny things at the bottom for us to potentially consider in terms of what we might start with measurement work. I've gone over time a little bit today, and I think I have only unlocked the door. I don't think I've even opened the door that is you know, available to us. What's behind the door when it comes to coherence? I think it's a huge subject. I think this subject is going to really increase in terms of its importance and in terms of its relevance in the world of transformation and modern leadership. There is a lot of emerging research and data and just, you know, narrative. There's twittering going on around this word coherence. So I think it's something that we really ought to be aware of, and something that we ought to be starting to think about more and more consciously in our transformation, especially if we want to humanize transformation and certainly consider modern mindset theory in it. I guess the banana skins for today are really key for me. Disconnecting from the human. We said that at the start, and I think that's a massive, massive thing. And the second thing for me is, don't slip up by thinking the metrics around this are too hard. That's what we get paid for. This is our world. And I think, you know, just starting with one thing around coherence that we've talked about today, it might be strategy with culture, it might be heart with mind, it might be well-being with performance, doesn't matter what it is, but let's just start with one thing and then just start monitoring that metric from there, and others will emerge. But those are two key banana skins for me in terms of coherence, if we want to bring coherence into our work as change and transformation practitioners. I'm going to shut up there because I've talked so much today to bring this concept of coherence, which I just think is, you know, it's as old as time, but it's something that I think is a real missing metric, as well as missing piece in our conscious design and narrative around change and transformation. I'm going to leave it there and just throw it open to the room and just see, is there something that has resonated with you today, or where is your head at? What are you thinking about right now? Claire, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, where do you start? So a lot of what has only been touched upon today, you know, you can see how actually coherence, the topic in and of itself, brings everything together. So, you know, I could see where the Maya was coming in, the small shifts, the positive feedback loop, the power of you, the power of one, and actually some of the things that were on the slide, I say this quite often, like, I can see all these things but can't see how they're connected. That's kind of how I describe it in my head. So it's where, you know, where's my coherence? So yes, so much, but start with something small. Absolutely. Just do a small shift. Yeah. Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire. What about you, Jane?
So a lot of this aligns with as a relationship systems coach. This is all alignment to that. But my takeaway was around this, and Claire just talked about it then, like being in that dissonance, that comfortableness. But actually, that's a journey, and it's okay to be in that. And it's like moving along to align that vibration. And I really like some of the concepts around bringing that language, because this is the challenge, is leaders understanding the language and aligning with it. Sometimes when new words come out, it becomes jarring because it's like it's not accessible. It's like, this is new, got to learn something new, haven't got time, haven't got capacity. And the importance of that you said at the end around the metrics and bringing it into that, because, you know, yes, there are ways to measure, and there are ways to measure energy, excitement, and that side of things that people forget, like the real importance of energy. Is one of my takeaways, and thinking about that. I do it already, but it kind of brings me more towards that coherence on my own journey.
Yeah, I love that, and absolutely agree with you. And do you know what I find fascinating? If we were scientists, if this was a scientific conversation and we were talking about energy, everybody would be comfortable. But because we're talking about change and transformation, and we're in a business organizational environment, the word just is a little bit more difficult to introduce into conversation. It's quite incredible. Quite incredible. And I've just noticed that we are at time. And Tom, I was going to come to you and just ask you very quickly what, whether there's anything resonated with you today. We've got a few seconds.
Very, very big topic, very overwhelming. And I think the comfort for me is coherence could be seen as like a black and white thing. Either you are coherent or not. But I think it's actually, there's progress that you can make to have greater coherence, and every step along that line is worthwhile and valuable. There's a lot of work to do, but every step towards that has got value.
Oh, without a doubt. And the other thing as well, from what you just said there, because when you start getting into the world of coherence and words like vibration and frequency and energy, but when they are normalized for you, what happens, Tom, is that you achieve a point of coherence, and then that means you can increase your vibration and your frequency from there. And that is where you get into the world of positive intelligence or positive relational energy, which again, we know is research backed. So I loved what you just said there. That's absolutely fantastic. Another Wednesday and another humanizing transformation conversation, a little bit different today, as I said at the start, but hopefully valuable for everybody to take one tiny wee thing away to explore. And of course, I will share these slides with everybody after the fact, and also we'll share that covering, some links on covering as well, if anybody would like to link in with that and discover more. Thank you again. I'm going to bid everybody adieu. I'll see you in a fortnight's time for another topic around humanizing transformation and all modern mindset theory. And go well, stay safe, and speak to you soon. Thanks everybody for joining.